Today, our story takes you to Middleton, Texas, where the town is shocked by a gruesome murder of a prominent figure in the community. October 10th, 2012, in Middleton, Texas. Police receive a distressing call regarding the body of 69-year-old former Mayor Henry Thomas, found lifeless in a secluded alley behind a popular downtown cafe. What initially seemed like a case of robbery gone wrong spirals into a twisted tale of deceit, infidelity, and a dark secret affair with fatal consequences. Let's start this story from the year 2009. Vanessa Miller was a 23-year-old woman who had been married to Frank Miller for 3 years. They lived in the small town of Middleton, Texas, a place where everyone knew each other and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. Vanessa had always been seen as the picture-perfect young housewife. She had striking dark hair, a flawless complexion, and a natural charm that made her stand out in the close-knit community. On the outside, everything about her life seemed perfect, but Vanessa felt an overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction growing inside her. Frank, who was 28, was a hard-working mechanic, respected for his dedication and skill. His business was steady, and he spent long hours at the garage, often working late into the night to meet the demands of his customers. Frank loved Vanessa, but he didn't realize how distant he had become. His focus on work meant that he overlooked the growing emptiness Vanessa felt. While Frank's absences weren't intentional, they left Vanessa feeling alone. Their conversations had become routine and shallow, revolving around Frank's work or household chores. By the middle of 2009, Vanessa began to feel trapped, suffocated by the repetitive nature of her days. Her mornings were spent running errands, cooking, and cleaning, while her afternoons were long and uneventful. Despite her beauty and intelligence, Vanessa found herself longing for something more exciting, something to break the monotony. She often looked at the calendar, marking time that seemed to stand still. She was only 23, but she felt much older than her years, burdened by the mundane routine her life had fallen into. In contrast to Vanessa's relatively simple life, Henry Thomas, now 66, was a man who had lived a long and full life. He had served as Middleton's mayor for over 2 decades, retiring in 2005 after years of steering the town's political landscape. Though retired, Henry remained a powerful figure in Middleton, not just because of his past position, but also due to his wealth and influence. He had a hand in most local decisions, his connections running deep within the town's leadership. Henry had always been a larger-than-life personality. His commanding presence and confident demeanor made him well-respected, but as he grew older, his influence extended beyond politics. People still sought him out for advice, and Henry enjoyed the attention. However, behind closed doors, his life was far from perfect. His marriage to Margaret, a woman now in her late 60s, had long lost its spark. After 40 years together, they lived more like roommates than partners. Henry's wandering eye was something Margaret chose to ignore, perhaps out of loyalty or simply out of exhaustion from years of trying to rein in his flirtatious nature. In late 2009, a local charity gala was held in Middleton, an annual event that gathered the town's most notable figures. Henry attended as one of the special guests, his reputation still holding strong in social circles. Vanessa, who rarely attended such events, was invited by a neighbor who thought it would be good for her to get more involved in the community. Feeling both flattered and curious, she decided to go, hoping for a change from her usual routine. Frank, busy with work, didn't mind her going alone. At the event, Vanessa stood out immediately. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, she caught Henry's attention the moment he laid eyes on her. They exchanged pleasantries early in the evening, but Henry was intrigued. His natural charm drew Vanessa in, and they spoke at length, with Henry offering his insights into community involvement and local charities. Vanessa, feeling the excitement she had longed for, found herself captivated by his experience and the way he effortlessly commanded the room. For Henry, it was another opportunity to engage with a beautiful young woman, but Vanessa wasn't like the others. Her intelligence and beauty, combined with the vulnerability she subtly projected, intrigued him. She wasn't openly flirtatious, but her admiration for him was evident, something Henry enjoyed immensely. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa started to visit Henry's office on the pretense of getting advice about how she could contribute to community projects. Each visit seemed harmless at first, with Henry offering suggestions on various charity events she could join. He spoke of his experiences as mayor, sharing stories about how Middleton had evolved over the years, recounting events from 1995 and earlier, which Vanessa found fascinating. The conversations always remained casual, but there was an undercurrent of attraction between them. By early 2010, these visits became a regular occurrence. Vanessa found herself looking forward to their meetings, dressing a little nicer each time and staying a little longer. Henry, now 67, found himself drawn to her energy, something he hadn't felt in a long time. His affection for Vanessa grew with each visit, and though they hadn't crossed any lines yet, the tension between them was undeniable. As Henry's involvement in Vanessa's life deepened, Frank remained oblivious. His long hours at the garage kept him distracted, and he saw nothing wrong with Vanessa spending time on community work. He had always admired Henry for his service to the town, never suspecting that anything more than professional advice was being exchanged. Vanessa, on the other hand, felt herself torn between the life she had and the thrill that Henry provided. She wasn't sure where things were headed, but the idea of being wanted by someone as powerful as Henry Thomas excited her. The monotony of her days was fading, replaced by the anticipation of their next meeting. By the end of 2010, the affair that was yet to begin was already simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode into something much more dangerous. By early 2010, Vanessa and Henry's secret affair had begun, a relationship that would spiral out of control over the next 2 years. Despite the 46-year age difference, Vanessa found herself captivated by the attention and sense of power that Henry brought into her life. What had started as casual meetings in his office had escalated to secret rendezvous in luxury hotels just outside Middleton. Each meeting was carefully planned, ensuring no one in town would see them together. Henry, now 67, was intoxicated by this newfound affair. He hadn't felt this alive in years, and the thrill of being with someone as young and vibrant as Vanessa only fueled his obsession. He lavished her with expensive gifts, jewelry, designer clothes, even secret trips to nearby cities, where they could be together without the prying eyes of Middleton's gossipers. Henry would often make grand promises about their future, telling Vanessa how they could be together openly, if only she would leave her husband, Frank. Vanessa, on the other hand, enjoyed the excitement but remained cautious. She knew how small towns worked, how secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. Middleton was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, and even though they met outside the town's borders, she always feared someone would find out. Yet, the excitement of sneaking around, the thrill of being desired by someone as powerful as Henry, kept her coming back. Over time, their meetings became more frequent. By mid-2011, they were seeing each other almost weekly, each time slipping away for a few hours of indulgence. But as the months wore on, Vanessa began to feel the weight of what she had gotten herself into. What had once been thrilling was now suffocating. Henry, now 68, had grown increasingly possessive, wanting more and more of Vanessa's time. He started to call her constantly, insisting she spend longer hours with him. He became jealous of anyone else in her life, including Frank, who remained blissfully unaware of his wife's secret. It was during this period that Henry began pressuring Vanessa to leave Frank. He didn't see why they should hide anymore. He wanted her all to himself, and the idea of Vanessa staying with her husband became intolerable to him. Henry spoke often about how their lives could be better together, how he could give her everything Frank couldn't. But Vanessa knew that divorcing Frank would ruin her life in Middleton. She wasn't ready to give up her comfortable, familiar life for a man who, despite his wealth, was controlling and demanding. As the affair deepened, so did Henry's manipulations. He began threatening Vanessa, reminding her of the explicit messages and videos they had exchanged. He told her that if she didn't leave Frank, he would make everything public. Henry's controlling nature became unbearable for Vanessa, and by August 2011, she seriously contemplated ending the affair. However, she felt trapped. She had become financially dependent on Henry's gifts and his promises of a future. More than that, she feared the consequences of ending things. Henry's threats weighed heavily on her mind, and she knew he would follow through if she tried to cut ties. The turning point came on October 1st, 2012. Vanessa had agreed to meet Henry at one of their usual places, a small, secluded hotel just outside Middleton. She had been dreading the meeting for days, knowing that Henry would once again push her to leave Frank. She could feel the suffocation growing every time they met, his constant need to control her becoming more oppressive. This time, she had made up her mind. She was going to end it, no matter the consequences. When Vanessa arrived, Henry was already there, waiting for her with his usual possessive air. He didn't waste time, once again urging her to leave Frank. He spoke of how they could finally be together openly, how he was tired of hiding their relationship. Vanessa tried to stay calm, telling him that she couldn't leave Frank, that it wasn't as simple as he made it seem. But Henry refused to listen. His jealousy flared, and the conversation escalated into a heated argument. Henry, now 69, became enraged, accusing Vanessa of using him, of never intending to leave her husband. In his anger, he slapped her across the face, shocking Vanessa to the core. The slap wasn't just physical. It was a violent reminder of how trapped she had become in this toxic relationship. In a panic, Vanessa looked around the room for something, anything, to defend herself. Her eyes fell on a heavy lamp sitting on the nightstand. Without thinking, she grabbed the lamp and swung it at Henry. The blow landed hard on the side of his head, and Henry collapsed instantly, unconscious on the floor. Vanessa stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just happened. But as the seconds passed, she realized with horror that Henry wasn't moving. She knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to wake him. But it was too late. The blow had been too strong, and Henry was dead. The room fell silent, the weight of the situation crashing down on Vanessa. She had killed him. What had started as a desperate act of self-defense had now spiraled into something much darker. For a moment, Vanessa stood there in shock, unable to move, her mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. She hadn't meant for it to end this way, but now there was no turning back. After striking Henry with the lamp, Vanessa fled the scene in a state of panic. She left his body lying in the alley behind the hotel and drove home, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just transpired. She hadn't intended to kill him, but the reality of her actions weighed heavily on her as she tried to compose herself. By the time she arrived home, it was late into the night of October 1st, 2012, and the darkness seemed to close in around her. She knew she couldn't stay there for long, but she also knew she had to act as normal as possible. The next morning, October 2nd, 2012, Henry's body was discovered by a pedestrian walking through the alley. The man immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene and began their investigation. The initial assumption was that it had been a robbery gone wrong. The alley was in a part of the town known for its seedy reputation, and Henry's wallet had been left untouched, which added to the confusion. There was no immediate sign that Vanessa had been involved, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though she might have escaped unnoticed. However, by October 6th, 2012, the police had completed their autopsy and released an official statement confirming that Henry Thomas had died from blunt force trauma. The blow to his head had been fatal, and the investigators began to piece together what had happened in his final hours. They quickly ruled out the possibility of a robbery and began looking for other motives. Suspicion grew as they uncovered security footage from a nearby cafe, which showed Henry entering the alley shortly before his death. Moments later, Vanessa was seen entering the same alley. At first, the footage didn't directly link Vanessa to the crime, but it raised enough questions for the police to dig deeper. Henry's family was interviewed, and it didn't take long for them to disclose the details of his affair with Vanessa. His wife, Margaret, had suspected something was going on, but she never imagined it would end in murder. As rumors of the affair began to spread through the town, Middleton was thrown into chaos. The once respected former mayor's reputation was shattered, and whispers of his secret relationship with a much younger woman dominated conversations everywhere. As the investigation ramped up, detectives searched through Henry's phone records and discovered a series of incriminating text messages between him and Vanessa. The messages revealed the full extent of their relationship, including Henry's threats to expose their affair if Vanessa didn't leave her husband. The evidence painted a picture of a manipulative, controlling man who had pushed Vanessa to the edge. By October 8, 2012, the police brought Vanessa in for questioning. She initially denied any involvement, maintaining that she had nothing to do with Henry's death. However, the mounting evidence was impossible to ignore. Detectives presented her with the footage from the cafe, the text messages, and statements from Henry's family, all pointing toward her as the prime suspect. Vanessa tried to hold her composure, but as the pressure grew, cracks began to show in her story. The final blow came when forensic teams examined the crime scene and found partial fingerprints belonging to Vanessa on the lamp used to kill Henry. This evidence, combined with everything else the investigators had gathered, was enough to implicate her. On October 12, 2012, Vanessa was formally charged with second-degree murder. The town was in shock. What had started as a scandalous affair had now become a full-blown murder case, and the media quickly picked up on the story. News outlets painted a sordid picture of Vanessa. They portrayed her as a young, manipulative woman who had seduced an older, wealthy man for his money and influence. Headlines blared accusations of greed, lust, and deceit. And the once quiet town of Middleton became the center of attention for reporters and true crime enthusiasts. The public seemed eager to believe the worst about Vanessa, seeing her as someone who had taken advantage of Henry's status for personal gain. But as the trial approached, more details began to emerge, shifting the narrative slightly. Vanessa's defense team argued that she had been trapped in an abusive and controlling relationship, manipulated by Henry's threats and constant pressure. They emphasized the power imbalance between the two, with Henry using his influence to keep Vanessa in the affair against her will. The text messages that once seemed to condemn her now appeared as evidence of the emotional and psychological control Henry had exerted over her. Despite the media frenzy, there was still much to be revealed. The affair had been hidden for years, but now every detail was coming to light. People began to wonder whether Vanessa had acted in cold blood or if she had simply been driven to the breaking point by Henry's obsessive behavior. As the town of Middleton waited for the trial to begin, opinions were divided. Some saw Vanessa as a cold-blooded murderer, while others believed she was a victim of Henry's manipulation. The scandal rocked the small town, and whispers of the affair spread even further. Old friends turned against Vanessa, neighbors avoided her, and the media continued to spin their version of events. But with the trial looming, it was clear that this story was far from over. The courtroom would soon become the stage where all the secrets, lies, and betrayals would finally be laid bare. The question now was not just whether Vanessa had killed Henry, but why. What had truly driven her to such a deadly confrontation that night in October 2012? As the days passed, everyone in Middleton was left with the same question. Was Vanessa a cold-hearted murderer, or a woman pushed to the edge by a man who had taken too much control? The truth would soon be revealed in the court of law, where the final chapter of this tragic tale would be written. The trial begins on January 5th, 2013, with the courtroom packed and media outlets eager for sensational details. Prosecutors portray Vanessa as a calculated manipulator who saw Henry as a ticket out of her mundane life. They argue that she murdered him in cold blood when he threatened to expose their affair. Vanessa's defense team counters by claiming she acted in self-defense, painting Henry as an aggressive and controlling figure. The trial reveals explicit details about the affair, including text messages in which Henry becomes increasingly possessive, even threatening to expose her if she didn't comply with his demands. Vanessa's defense hinges on this narrative that Henry's control escalated, leading to the fatal confrontation. On February 20th, 2013, after weeks of testimonies, including from Henry's closest allies, the jury finds Vanessa guilty of manslaughter rather than second-degree murder, citing that while her actions were deliberate, they were provoked by Henry's aggression. Vanessa is sentenced to 15 years in prison on March 20th, 2013. Her life, once full of promise and excitement, crumbles in the aftermath. Frank divorces her, the town turns against her, and she is left to reflect on her choices behind bars. The affair, once a thrilling secret, becomes a cautionary tale for Middleton, a small town forever haunted by the scandal of its old mayor and the young housewife who brought about his end. As the dust settles, many in Middleton continue to speculate. Was Vanessa truly driven to murder in self-defense? Or did she see an opportunity to rid herself of Henry once and for all? This story of seduction, power, and murder leaves readers with a lingering question. What does it take for someone to cross the line from victim to killer? Find out in our next case, where a mother's affair with her son's girlfriend ends in the deadliest death you could ever see.